Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. We talk about the problems people face in their day to day lives. Let's start with the video. I am home for the weekend from my university and have been really trying to enjoy my time off from all the studies. I try to sleep in on the weekends, especially when I'm at my parents' house. So obviously, I had no plans of waking up early. But today in the morning, my stepmom woke up by knocking at the door. She told me she needs my help with something and that she'd appreciate it if I could come down and meet her before breakfast. I was groggy and confused, but told her I'll be down in a few minutes. Now, I know my stepmom is an absolute sweetest gem and would never disturb me in my sleep or do something that would be troublesome for me unless whatever it is she needs is very important. That's why I didn't argue with her and gave up on my sleep. But still, being woken up just 2 hours after I went to bed made me a little cranky. When I went downstairs, she was sitting with coffee at the kitchen table. She offered me a cup and asked me to take a seat. I felt like a kid from middle school who was about to get a lecture because they neglected their homework. But of course, that wasn't the case. I saw some papers lying on the table. They looked official, and I asked my stepmom what they were about. She told me the reason she needed to talk to me was those same papers. Now, I normally don't talk about anything that looks official because I'm still in university pursuing my management course. But on occasions, my dad would ask me to sign some papers because my mother's shares of my dad's company were passed down to me after she passed away. Since I turned 21, I was required to do my part and sign on the major deals and stuff. And because my stepmom joined my dad in his business after they married, it's normal for her to ask me to talk about documents and stuff. That's why I was not surprised when she told me she woke me up to talk about those papers. I asked her what they were about, and she told me it's about liquidating a small business they acquired. Since my mother was the one who was managing that company from the start, it's normal for me to now sign off on these. I told her I'd take a look and sign over them. But she said that she's in a hurry, and if I can make it quick, it'll be easier for her. She didn't want to be late for work. Now, since I've literally been studying management and accounting, I have a habit of reading through every document that goes through me, and my dad taught me to always keep a note of the stuff I sign. So I told her I'll be quick, but I won't sign without looking through. She tried to persuade me, but in the end gave up. I read through the first few pages and everything looked in order until I noticed the very last two pages that were looking suspicious. I started reading them carefully, and to my utter horror, it was a document stating that all my inheritance would transfer to my stepmom's kid. I asked her what was the meaning of sneaking in those papers, and she had the grace to look ashamed. When my mom collected herself, she told me that it was the right thing to do. And because she didn't want this topic to be a source of awkwardness between us, she thought she would just sneak the papers in. Like hell, I believe that. If she didn't want any awkwardness, the right thing would have been to talk to me straightforward about whatever it was that was going through her head. That was the first time I was saddened by something she did, and told her that I'll directly talk to Dad about it. So my dad came back home after work and I went into his room. I told him I needed to discuss something with him and he asked me to sit down with him. I showed him the papers my stepmom almost got me to sign and told him how she lied to me. I told him that I don't want to complain about her and I really do love her, but I am really hurt with the way she tried to cheaply get me to sign off my inheritance. I told him that I wouldn't have minded sharing whatever was mine with my step sibling if only she would have come and talked to me. But instead, she pulled this trick. And now I'm so angry that I don't want to even think about it. My dad was silent all the while I was talking about the incident that happened in the morning. His silence was suspicious, and I was beginning to doubt my decision of coming to him. I asked him if he knew about this beforehand, and he told me that my stepmom had already discussed this with him, and he was the one who got the papers ready. It was like my entire being was crushed. I couldn't believe my dad would be in on this. I couldn't even begin to understand the meaning of this. I asked him why he wants me to give up on my inheritance and the only thing my real mom left me. I was practically begging him to explain at that point. He told me it was not a light decision for him to make, and he had carefully considered the possibilities of this decision. He told me that with my educational background, I'll be able to get a well paying job very easily, and I wouldn't have to struggle much. But he was concerned about the future of my step siblings, and my stepmom was getting worried after each day she got a new report from their school about their misbehaviors. He told me that he loves me and if he could, he would give me everything he had, but my stepmom told him to consider the future of his family very carefully, and he had no choice but to agree with her. I was so angry after listening to those words that I walked out of the house. I packed my duffel bag I carry with me on weekends and went back to my college dorm. AITA for not understanding the concerns of my parents, or is my reaction normal for any person? Is it too much of an overreaction to be hurt at being lied to and unwillingly dragged into a family fight? I didn't talk to either my dad or my stepmom for the last 3 weeks. I didn't even go home and skip this weekend's visit to my house. I was so pissed at my dad for not coming to me or trying to make me understand his decision. I was especially pissed at my stepmom, who treated me nicely all my life, only to pull a cheap trick and get me to sign off on my family inheritance. I have thought a lot about the events of that weekend, all the while I was stuck in university. No matter what happens, I don't want anything to cause a rift between me and my dad. Honestly, I don't even want to fight with my stepmom. I really do love them both, and despite what has happened, the fact is that they have treated me with respect and kindness and have loved me all my life. So I've decided to go back this weekend and talk face to face with them. Since it has been a long time, I'm hoping we'll be able to keep control over our emotions and meet each other halfway. So, like I told you guys, I went back to my parents' house last weekend in order to talk to them and work things out. When I reached home, my stepmom told me she had made me dinner with all the things I like, and she apologized for how things were left between us. I knew she wasn't a bad person who would hurt me willingly. After all, she had always been nice to me. I hugged her and told her sorry for shouting at her and not trying to talk with her rationally. I told her now that I'm here, I would like to sit down and try to understand where she's coming from. I also told her that I'd like it if we could have this conversation in front of Dad, because things weren't good between him and me, and I really don't want to leave any bad blood to foster. The next day in the afternoon, my dad came back home, and all three of us went into his home office. I asked them exactly what their concerns were, and they tried to sneakily get my signs on that piece of paper. I told them that I was hurt more from the fact that they did not consider talking to me up front about the whole situation and instead pulled this cheap trick. My stepmom was the one who answered me first. She told me that because of how poorly my step siblings are performing in school and how the reports of their misbehaviors or missing classes kept piling up, her concerns grew day by day. She told me it got to a point where it was hard for her to control them, and no amount of grounding was able to get them to understand how they were ruining their future. With how unpredictable life is, she wanted to keep a backup to make sure that her kids survive, and that's why she asked my dad to leave our inheritance to them. She told me that she really didn't want to hurt me, and the whole thing was so shameful that she couldn't bring herself to talk to me, and that's why she sneaked in the papers instead of presenting them to me directly. Now, I understand her concerns, but I was hurt that she thinks so badly of me that she wouldn't even come talk to me face to face. I explained to her that I really don't mind giving over my inheritance, but she needs to promise me that she would never do something like this again. I told both my parents that I love them more than any wealth, and they need to understand this fact. We all apologized to each other, and in the end, my dad came to the decision that I'll be giving over everything I own to my step siblings, but not right now. He told me that in the case something were to happen to either of them, only then will I transfer the inheritance. Now that things have been cleared up between us, I feel a lot better. I'm back on campus and I'll be going back home soon for the end of the semester. NTA, you're not the a-hole for reacting the way you did. If I was in your place and if my parents would have tried to pull something like this, I wouldn't have just screamed at them. I would have left the house for good. I don't know how you were able to calmly talk to them, even after knowing the truth. NTA, I think your stepmom is the real a-hole here, and the way she got your dad on her side was a shitty move. I hope you don't actually buy into their reason and give away the only thing your mom left you. I, 29 female, moved into a new apartment a few months ago where my now roommate, 34 female, had been renting for about 3 months longer. I was upfront about having a cat since I knew she had two as well, but after I signed the lease with our landlord, she suddenly started texting us both with concerns about our animals mixing. It was strange, but also a bit too late to do anything about it. We've had our fair share of the typical roommate disagreements, but nothing gets her more upset than what she perceives as injustices to her cats. It started with accusing my guy of starting fights, but after taking a few videos of her cats cornering mine and instigating the fights themselves, she said it was my fault for having him move into their home. After about 3 weeks of agreeing to keep our animals in our bedrooms on a rotating basis while we're both at work, her cats would get to roam MWF, while mine could roam TTH. She decided this was not fair to her babies and that I should keep my cat in my room anytime I'm not home. I pushed back on this and she reluctantly caved but makes a point to bring it up every so often. Her latest gripe is that she doesn't like the food I feed my cat, especially because her cats sneak in and eat it instead of all natural stuff she feeds them. I told her that his vet has no issue with what I feed him and that I simply don't have enough money to feed him the way she feeds her cats. Her reference, I have seen this woman live off ramen for a week so she could feed her cats fresh venison. Initially, she offered a compromise. If I were to buy higher quality food, she would split the price difference. I agreed, and the next time his food was low, I purchased one of the foods on the list she provided. When it came time to settle our monthly bills, etc., I mentioned the expense, and she claims she never agreed to split the cost, and that if I loved my cat, I would be willing to pay for it. I told her absolutely not, and that I would be going back to the old food when this bag ran out. Naturally, this pissed her off, and she suggested that if I insist on buying him McDonald's for cats, the least I could do was purchase a collar sensor bowl for him. Essentially, it's a covered bowl that opens when a tag that could be put on a cat collar is near enough to the sensor. I told her that I have no problem having my cat wear the collar, but I don't feel like it is my responsibility to pay for it. I have no problem with her cats raising his food. She does, so she should be the one to pay for it. She insists that because my cat would be the one using it, I should have to pay for it. AITA for not spending my money on this thing? And for what it's worth, I have zero intention of renewing my lease next spring. NTA, you offered completely acceptable and good compromises. It's on her to accept or decline. I would refuse to engage further and, as you said, not renew next year. Good luck. I'm guessing your roommate and you split the cost of rent and utilities. That makes the space and its use half yours. Your roommate seems more interested in controlling your cat and you than finding a reasonable accommodation that all the cats can live with. The food is just one more excuse to complain and try to get you to do things her way. NTA. So I'm a 28-year-old woman. I'm gay. Important to the story. Now, my mother is a single mother. She comes from a big conservative Christian family. My mom was easily the black sheep. She had me at 16, which in itself was a big issue for my grandfather. We lived with my grandparents until my mother, at age 25, came out as gay. That was the limit of my grandfather, and he disowned my mother and my mom cut all contact with her family. Now, my grandparents were rich, not extreme, but they had a lot of money, especially a big summer house. I say that, but it is a really big house with beautiful scenery next to a beautiful lake. It was laid down by my grandfather's father and has since been improved upon and renovated. It has been somewhat of a family retreat where all my uncles, aunts, and cousins visit regularly during the summer. I visited twice when I was younger and I loved it. Sadly, when COVID hit, my grandfather and my mother sadly passed away. Now, this made my grandmother reach out to me, and I liked that. She wanted to make it up as much as she could. Sadly, last year she passed away as well. She left token sums to all her children and grandchildren, but in compensation, she also left me the summer house. I made it into an Airbnb, and I've been making a lot of cash from it. Obviously, this made the rest of my family furious because they could no longer visit during the summer, prime season. But again, I don't know them or my cousins. Here is where I might be the a hole. My aunt reached out to me the other week, telling me, not asking, that her daughter had planned to have her wedding there next summer. She has been dreaming of it since she was a child, and apparently it's the designated family wedding spot. The house has been hired out for weddings before, since there is room for a venue and lots of rooms for guests to stay over. Now, I told my aunt that was not possible because the week she wanted to have her wedding was already booked. But I said if she wanted a different date, she could put down the deposit for what I charge for a wedding and book a different date. Now she was furious and asked if I was serious in actually charging my family to have their wedding there. And I just said I didn't know them, have not met them in person since I was like 6. And yes, I would because weddings bring in a lot of money. Her family has been blowing up my phone and social media, calling me an a hole. So, AITA? You absolutely have to have them put down a deposit. If something gets broken or damaged, they will accuse you of not being understanding of family. In the interest of compromise, if you want to let them use the house, tell them a few dates that the house is free and charge them half so you don't feel screwed and they don't feel like they're like everybody else. And also, to set an important precedent that for any future family events, there are no more freebies. But it is also completely okay to bill them 100% like you would anybody else. The house was a gift to you. It is no longer theirs to commandeer at their pleasure. Probably unpopular opinion, but soft YTA. I get that technically you are not obligated. That doesn't seem to be the nuance you are asking for here. I assume your cousin grew up spending wonderful summers at the cabin as well, and your aunt is probably telling the truth when she says her daughter has always wanted to get married there. For you, this cabin represents a cash cow, but for them it is likely a connection to family that has passed and sweet growing up memories. Your cousin is not the one that alienated you and your mother. She is as innocent in all of this as you are. Nor does it seem that you are concerned with financial vulnerability if you were to work with your cousin. Again, I understand that you have no specific and technical obligation, but if you wanted to truly not be TA, you could have chosen any number of options. You could have congratulated your cousin and suggested perhaps to host the event on a different date in a smaller manner at cost to your staff, etc. You could have suggested that the bride and groom spend the first night of their honeymoon at the cabin as a generous wedding gift. Really, anything that would recognize that a woman wants a rich part of her family history to be part of a very important day. A small gesture would have gone a very long way.